So maybe we've scheduled our first client call and we're definitely not freaking out, but maybe we could use a little advice. How to break the ice. First of all, remember that everyone feels kind of the same about small talk. We don't really want to do it, but it's important for setting the tone. And we want that tone to start off as polite and calm and confident as possible. So if I'm going into a call with a potential client, I'm going to do my best to try and mirror their vibe. Hopefully that vibe is, again, polite and confident and kind, hopefully. But some clients may be more on the playful side versus some being more on the serious side. Some want to get right down to business and some do want to have more small talk. Some want to talk big picture and some want to keep things more down in those details. So it's important to be able to read into their behaviors, whether verbal or nonverbal, to make sure that the conversation keeps going and doesn't go awry in a way that the client would not like. Also, breaking the ice, don't be afraid to compliment them on something. You can compliment them on your work that you've seen of them so far. If they started a company, you can compliment them about the company. Or if it seems appropriate to compliment them on something physical going on in the call, you can feel free to do that too. Again, as long as it's appropriate. And don't be afraid to rehearse this before the call, as it is kind of the first thing that's going to come up. The saying hello, the small talk, the let's getting into it. Sometimes that can be the most awkward thing. And so rehearsing it in your brain is sometimes a really helpful thing, and it's very helpful for me, and I do it all the time. If we haven't met yet, I am Colleen, and in this channel, I help you to get a video editing job, and I help you get paid doing what you love. So for more tips on that, or just to support my channel, I'd so appreciate it if you can hit the like button below and hit subscribe if you haven't already. And for some more in-depth conversations about all the topics that I talk about, be sure to also check out my Skillshare profile, which has a slew of classes for you to check out. You can view those classes as well as get a free month of Skillshare just by clicking the link in the description below. Okay, let's talk about what to talk about, because we want to make sure that we cover all of our bases and that we feel like we're getting all the details we need out of said potential client. But we also want to make sure we keep those questions relative and concise for the client so that they're not feeling too overwhelmed. So if the opportunity presents itself for you to ask a question first, a very easy first question would be, why are you looking for a video editor? This allows them to give a bit of an intro about themselves if they haven't already, into the kind of work that they have done, into any struggles that they may have had in the past, either without a video editor or with a previous video editor that didn't work out. And it helps you get some insight into what their mind is thinking when it comes to a video editor. Where is their mind in terms of what this video editor is going to do? And what are the most prevalent needs that they are having that is requiring them to look for said video editor? A close similar question to that is, have they ever worked with a video editor before? And this gives you a lot of insight, because if they have never worked with a video editor before, they may not have a clear idea as to what the role entails for said video editor position. They may not be aware of everything that you can offer them in terms of your skills. They may also not be aware of everything that you shouldn't have to offer them based on your skills. And so read into what their answer is here. There may be a little bit of education needed on your part if they have never worked with a video editor before. And then in general, what else to talk about? You want to keep the conversation really focused on them, what their goals are, what their vision is for the project, whether this is a very long-term project or just one specific video. What is their goal for the video? What are they going to do with it after it's done? What is the target audience for said video? What is the message that they are trying to communicate? Is there a specific style or tone that you should be using when you're making this video? Do they have examples for you to reference in terms of past videos or different videos that they've never done that they are just using as a style reference, so you can see where their mind is at in terms of what they want this video to look like? You also want to make sure you talk about timing and expectations. This may not be something that you have to hurry up and talk about until more towards the end of the conversation, but you want to make sure that you don't forget to get it in there, because this is a good action step to make sure you're both very clear on when do they need this final product, or if there are going to be multiple deadlines, do they have those deadlines planned out in advance? What is their preference on all of these things? Is there going to be a revision process? How many revisions have they done in the past or would be comfortable with? How many revisions are you yourself comfortable with. How are you going to be reviewing these files? Is it going to be through a viewing platform like Frame? Is it going to be just through sharing an export file and giving a list of time codes? And how would they like the final product? Would they prefer the project file that you edited in, or would they prefer an exported file that they can just upload to YouTube or do whatever they're going to do with it? Again, those are very action-specific questions. And so I don't think you need to get into them right at the top of the conversation, but I do think it is a must for making sure that you clarify what all of those expectations are going to be. Okay, let's get into what not to talk about. First of all, do not go in over explaining your own experience or lack of experience. Going in there with the overall vibe and maybe even directly saying that they will be your first client. Yeah, you're being honest, but it's not really relevant to the conversation. If you're already at the point where you're having either an interview or potentially a just first call with this client after being hired, reminding them of your inexperience is just not going to be a helpful thing for you, especially using it as any kind of excuse. If they ask you about what your process is or asking any kind of advice to you that may reflect your expertise, those are the kind of questions you may want to rehearse ahead of time to make sure that you have an answer for them that is not just, well, I don't have a process because you're my first client, so whatever you want to do. That's not a very reassuring answer for the client to hear. So I would give a little more thought into that and how you might go about answering it in a way that doesn't reflect your lack of experience. Kind of on the opposite side, you don't want to get too overly technical unless they ask specifically for it. The client does not need to be reminded or be educated on how exactly you are going to be editing their project down to the very specifics of what kind of cuts you're going to make in the timeline. They don't need to know any fancy specific editing jargon, and you trying to use that lingo on them to somehow display your expertise is not going to have the effect that you think it's going to have. The best kind of client conversations are when it's just two people having a conversation like real humans using real language to talk about real projects and real goals. Even a twinge of the sense that you are one-upping each other is not going to bode well for your relationship with that potential client. Similarly, don't critique their past work unless you are asked. For example, this is not the same thing, but very often I get a lot of emails from people, editors, social media people, thumbnail creators, all wanting to work with me. Some of them send very nice messages. Some of them do not. Some of them will go right into saying, your channel looks great, but here's the problems that I see with it. Now, I see that. I see what they're doing. I see that they are trying to get my attention, potentially play on my insecurities with my channel, tap into the strategy that they are the experts, and so they can critique my channel and say what's wrong with it and then say how they could fix it. But that is a risky strategy because they don't know me and they don't know how I'm going to interpret that critique. In my case, I don't particularly like that strategy. Maybe some potential clients would, maybe they welcome the feedback. But again, if the client didn't ask for it, I definitely would not give it to them. And if they do ask, if they do invite criticism or feedback on things that you can improve, I would do it carefully. I wouldn't go full throttle and say, thank goodness you asked. I have a whole list of things that we could be improving. You want to give respect to their work as it was. And I would trickle in those critiques or points of feedback slowly, just in case that client was only asking for feedback to maybe be nice. And a last quick thing, don't talk about pricing unless it comes up and the client specifically wants to talk about it, or until the end, at least, of the conversation. Again, that's kind of a big action item, and it could even be potentially a sensitive topic. What I have done in the past, especially if I wasn't sure how much I was going to be charging the client, I would simply say something like, thank you for your time. I'm going to review my notes, all the information you've given me, and I'm going to get back to you by the end of the day with a quote for you to think about based on the conversation we've had today. Here is the rate that I can offer you for this job. But sometimes the client may want to talk to you in the moment, and that is totally fine. I would just make sure to have that number in your head, what you're going to quote them, just in case they want to talk about it right then and there. But again, you just want to be careful not to jump right into it because there's a lot lot of other things that go into this conversation other than how much are we going to charge them. Okay, let's get into a few interview style questions. Here's a few pro level questions that I would advise you ask during your first conversation with your client. Again, we kind of reflected on this before, but what does success look like for this project? Of course, you don't have to ask it in that exact way, but you want to make sure that you're both on the same page in terms of how your work and your experience with them is going to lead that client to want to keep you on the team or hire you for the next project, essentially. So you want to make sure you're both working toward the same goal and have the same priorities. So however that works out for you to talk about in the conversation, you at least want to make sure that when you leave that conversation with the client, you are very aware of what that answer is. And then the rest of these questions get a little bit more technical, about as technical as you should probably get in a call like this, but they show that you have their video in mind and it shows your experience as a video editor. So talking about branding guidelines, are there any branding guidelines that you should be following? So you want to know exact color hex information, fonts, music, yes, no, where should you get it from, graphics information. You want to make sure you have their overall style down packed, and ideally so that you can potentially pull from their template or create your own template, whether it's just a Google Doc that you're pulling this information from or creating your own template in Premiere Pro. You want to make sure that you have set guidelines for how everything is going to look other than the video in terms of graphics and things like that. Again, you want to make sure you ask about a preferred file format for said client. Where are they going to be delivering this video? Are they going to be delivering it for YouTube? Are they going to be delivering it for their corporate website? Are they going to be delivering it for social media? Are they going to be delivering it for Sundance? You're going to need to know all of that information so that you know what the preferred file format, size, all that information. You're going to need to know where this video is going so that you can deliver it in the best way possible for them. And then are there any other specific workflow processes that you should be knowing about? Maybe they are just starting out and so they really don't have any workflow process. And if that's the case, that's fine. You guys can build one together. But if they do, it's going to be important for you to know and understand it. How are you guys sharing files back and forth? What is the process in terms of when they send you footage versus when they're going to send you B-roll versus a voiceover? Where can you find this information if you have to come back to it a week later? Knowing where all the footage and information is going to be living is incredibly important for a longer term client. And also understanding the workflow is just important for keeping you both accountable as well, making sure that you can expect that they're going to be sending you the footage at this time and you're going to be delivering them the video by this time. So all of those tips are great, I'm sure, I guess. But let's talk about how to act like it's not actually your first client. Because ultimately that is the goal. We're not trying to lie or pretend like we're something we're not, but we also don't want to be screaming, I'm a newbie to this client when they are going to be putting a lot of trust in us and they're going to be paying us, hopefully, for this work. So we want to make sure that we are approaching this client as confidently as possible because we want to get the job and then we want to be able to get more than just one client. So again, I said it before, but you really, even if you are so nervous, you need to go into it speaking confidently and calmly. If this means that you need to try and scale back your talking a little bit less, maybe you're prone to rambling, that's probably a good idea because you can say less while also still appearing friendly and understanding and welcoming to them and their ideas and their input, even if it's just in your own body language, nodding and smiling and showing that you are very fully understanding what they are saying. And then again, if you guys are talking about workflow or processes or expectations, coming at those conversations pretending like it's not the first time that you've done them, I think is going to help you greatly. Thinking about what an ideal workflow would be based off of even just work that you've done alone on the side as a passion project or whatever, and using using that knowledge to communicate to the client what your typical workflow might be is at least going to show them that you have a concept of how the video editing process works. Or if you really don't have any set workflow, you can be like me and come at every conversation with the client where it goes something like this. They ask me, what does your typical workflow look like? And I say, listen, it always depends on the client. I really like to just adapt my workflow to each client because I know that it differs greatly depending on different productivity platforms that you're using or file transfer softwares that you're using, and making it more of a back and forth conversation with the client about what they might prefer, what you might prefer, and then finding a solution together. I prefer that way because it helps me learn a little bit more about the client, and I learn a little bit about just different kinds of workflows and how it just works for different people. And I feel like I can do it in such a way where it doesn't necessarily make me sound like I don't have any experience, just makes me sound like I'm just very go with the flow, which for some clients, that is probably very helpful. Anyways, moving on from that, you want to make sure that you have your own set of productivity tools. Speaking of those, you at least at the bare minimum want to be very familiar with Google Docs because everybody uses Google Docs. If you have ever used Notion before, that can be helpful. And some clients use Notion. Some clients use Calendly for booking. You can use Calendly for booking as well. That will make you look very legit. You can use productivity softwares like Trello or Asana or ClickUp, just for no other reason than to just appear organized and just to be organized. But it's important that you're at least aware of these platforms because a lot of other clients use them. And it's just good to kind of have your head wrapped around how they work in the case that you need to use them for said client. Something that's kind of a tough conversation, and it really just depends on the kind of work that you're doing. You may want to have a contract or at least some sort of contract template ready in the case that you are going to be signing contracts with said client. I would say it is good practice to have a contract with said client. Do I do that with every client? No. Not necessarily. Some clients are just smaller creators. You just kind of work off the trust system, but that doesn't always help you, especially if you're dealing with a lot of different clients. I think it is important to be protecting ourselves and protecting our work and protecting our peace in 2025. And so I would definitely suggest having a contract template ready. You do not need to sign a contract with a client to get started on working together. It's not a need in the freelancing world that you have a contract or the work is not legitimate, but it is a way of protecting yourself, and that can be really important. On another note, it is a good practice to be aware of what your invoicing system is going to be. Do you have a process for how you're going to be sending out an invoice to this client? Whether you're going to use a payment software like QuickBooks or something, I don't think it's necessary if this is going to be your first client. Up until very recently, so for the very longest time, I have been just doing manual invoices for all of my clients, and then they pay me through whatever means they want. It could be PayPal, it could be by physical checks, it could be by Zelle, but having some sort of process prepped is going to be important. Again, it eludes confidence that you have a process already set up. So I do think that's important. And then lastly, I will say it is smart to follow up with a recap email, thanking them for their time, following up on any important information that came up during the conversation, or maybe that you had to look up afterwards, maybe following up with that quoted rate that you did or did not give them. But it's actually good just to have that in writing at the bare minimum. So clarifying what your rate is going to be with them via email at least puts it in writing where you both can agree via email on that. And then it also just establishes a relationship. Now you've got a back and forth going with said client. They can follow up with you then on any more information, and it just kind of adds to your reliability as a potential video editor for them. Look, everybody starts somewhere. I think what matters the most when talking to your first client is, number one, showing up, being professional, being polite, being friendly, and focusing the conversation on the client. Clients just want to be heard, they want to be understood, and they want to feel taken care of. And so whatever you do to make that happen, understanding that it is more about the client and serving the client than it is about you is going to be important here. If you have any thoughts or questions about talking to your very first client, I'd love to hear them in the comments below. A reminder to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already for more tips on video editing and freelance lifestyle. Thank you to my team. Again, I am Colleen, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Have the best one.